Okay, if you have a smartphone with you here today, I want everybody to get it out. Really, I'm not joking. Get it out, okay? Yeah, don't be a bad sport, all right? If you have a smartphone, get it out, okay? Now, I want everybody to form a single file line and go baptize their smartphone. I'm just joking. I don't want you to do that. So, from what I understand, we check our smartphones, okay? The average person checks their smartphones about 81,000 times a year. 81,000 times a year. If you work that out to waking minutes, that's once every 4 minutes of our waking lives. Okay? Which means that you will be tempted to check your phone about 7 or 8 times during this lesson. I don't know if you knew that. Okay? Now, I know many people use their Bible apps on their phones, and some of you can do that and not be tempted to go look elsewhere on your phones when you're hearing a Bible lesson or things like that, and that's totally fine. I do want us to think about what this little device is doing in our world today. Okay? I do want us to think about what this little device is doing in our world today, because there are theories that much of the turmoil that exists in our world, the craziness that you hear on the news that's going on, that a lot of that has to do with the fact that people are 24/7 being entertained, educated, anything and everything with their cell phone. They're tied to it. In fact, we're raising a generation of kids right now that is being raised on the smartphone. And so, I mean, I don't talk about current issues a lot when I preach. I really try to stick to going through the Scriptures and going through a book of the Bible. I don't like to talk about current issues all that much. I do think it is important. I do think it is important. Some of you right now are looking at stuff on your phone. You're looking at Facebook Marketplace. Okay? I know. I know what y'all are doing. I know. I see it. I want us to really think about the dangers of the smartphone. There's a book that I'm going to be talking about that I'm going to be using throughout this lesson. It's called 12 Ways Your Smartphone is Changing You. And I would highly recommend that you buy that book and read it. It's by a man named Tony Reinke. 12 Ways That Your Smartphone is Changing You. And it is, it's an eye-opening book. It's an eye-opening book. And I think it would be beneficial for all of us to look at that book and to read it. Recently, I overheard some teenagers having conversation. They were talking about a sign by the road that said, slow down, children at play. Okay, it was near a park. Okay, it said, slow down, children at play. And one of these teenagers said, I heard it. They said, why would any kid want to go out and play when they can stay inside and play on their cell phone? Now, that might be that might be an outlier, okay? That might not be a common thing among people, but I do think that it illustrates that there is an issue with this. There is an issue with this. And this is not a problem that exists just with young people. There are middle-aged people, there are old people that have become addicted to this thing that we have in our pockets. Let's be frank. Let's be frank. We're addicted to our smartphones. Young people, old people, everyone in between. These smartphones that we have are designed to make you addicted. Companies that make phones and apps employ psychologists who understand the science of habit forming and addiction so that you will stay hooked. They are designed to do that. If you think, oh, that's not going to happen to me, technology's not going to hook me, I'm not going to become addicted and obsessed, that's not going to happen to me, there are people who are hired by these companies that is their very job to do that. And they are researching how they can do it with young people. They're researching how they can do it with middle-aged people. They're researching how they can do it with older people. That is the whole purpose of their job. But before we talk about these smartphones, I want to really go deeper and talk about how anything and everything in the world can be used by Satan to lure you and distract you away from God. And that is the principal issue. Okay? The principal issue is not the smartphone. Okay? The smartphone is a tool. It can be used for good. In fact, many people have used it for good. In fact, we use a thing here called the Bible app every week. There have been hundreds of millions of people who have downloaded the Bible because of the Bible app. Okay? Woo. It's raining. Raining hard. The phone itself is not the problem and is not the issue. The issue is that Satan can use anything in our world to distract us, to take our attention away from God. Now, it just so happens that the smartphone wraps a lot of different technologies and uses all into one device, and that is why it has become such a major problem. It wraps the phone, the computer, the calendar, the camera, the video camera. I mean, it wraps everything, all of those different things, calculator, level, if you wanted to use it for a level and try and see if something, I mean, it wraps everything, a lot of things that you can think of into one device, and that's why it has become so pernicious, because we become so tied to it. So really, the cell phone is not the issue. The issue is that Satan is able to use the world to distract us. So I want to talk for a minute about how every distraction from Satan works. I want us to talk for a minute about how every distraction from Satan works. If you have your Bibles, I'd like for you to turn them to 1 John chapter 2. 1 John chapter 2. I'm going to turn over there as well. 1 John chapter 2, we're going to be starting in verse 15. John, the beloved disciple, says this: "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him." Loving the world takes our love away from the Father. That's what verse 15 is teaching. Loving the world takes our love away from the Father. You remember the old Bible passage? It's not old. I mean, it's the same age as most of the rest of these. But you remember the Bible passage that you cannot serve both God and money? Okay, we know that Bible passage from the Sermon on the Mount. You cannot serve both God and money. Well, we don't. It doesn't have to exclusively. That principle doesn't have to exclusively be money. You cannot serve both God and fill in the blank. You cannot be a slave, a servant to more than one thing. The divided loyalty doesn't work. And so, what John is teaching us is that loving the world takes our love away from the Father. This is what Satan wants to do. Here's the deal. Satan has been disarmed. Colossians chapter 2, verse 15 tells us that. Satan has been disarmed. His powers of sin and death have been ruled ineffective. Christ sacrificed himself. Christ nailed those things to the cross. He defeated death by being raised from the grave. He has promised new life to all of those who believe in him. Okay? He has defeated sin and death. Satan's powers have been nullified. So the only thing that Satan has left, really, is to convince people to take their attention away from God and put it on anything else. That's it. His method is to dangle a shiny thing in front of your eyes and say, "Look at this. Look at this." Is that not what he did with Adam and Eve? Eve, look at that fruit. Doesn't it look good? Okay? That is what he has. That's what he does. And that's his goal, that loving the world takes our love away from the Father. That's what he wants us to do. He wants us to love other things. Idols. Now, I doubt very few of us would pull out our phones and say, "Phone, I love you." Okay? All right, my middle child, well, recently she said she doesn't like meatballs, but in time past, she would eat meatballs, spaghetti and meatballs, and she would fork a meatball, and she would hold it up and say, "Meatball, I love you. I'm going to eat you." Okay? She loved meatballs. All right? I doubt very many of us would pull out our phone and go, "Phone, I love you." Okay? Probably not. But the affections of our hearts go well beyond us speaking words about something. It goes well beyond that. Loving the world takes our love away from the Father. That's what Satan wants to do. He wants to distract us. Here's how he does it. Notice verse 16. Notice verse 16. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. Loving the world involves misplaced desires which the Father wants to fulfill, but we seek to fulfill on things in the world instead. That's what it is. God wants us to have our fleshly desires fulfilled, but in His way. He wants us to have the desires of our eyes fulfilled, but in His way. He wants us to have a life that we can be proud of, that we can have honor in, but He wants it to be done in His way. And what Satan has done is he has tricked us and everybody else into believing that we can take those things for ourselves and do it in our way. Is that not what Adam and Eve did? God was going to give them everything. He was going to make them sons and daughters of God. He was going to glorify them. They were going to spread Eden all throughout the world. They were going to work alongside God. But they decided what was good for them instead, and they ate the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And they did it on their own. They did it on their own. Loving the world involves misplaced desires which the Father wants to fulfill, but we seek to fulfill on things in the world instead in our own way. And so we have desires of the flesh. You think there are a lot of people trying to fulfill desires of the flesh? I mean, everybody is burning in their passion about something, right? Okay, from the time that kids start to be about teenage age, 12, 13, 14, somewhere around there, they are burning in their passion and their desire and their lust for each other with all kinds of hormones. And it goes much deeper than that, but we understand the idea of the desires of the flesh. We understand the idea of the desires of the eyes. Of all people in the world, Americans understand the idea of the desires of the eyes. Where you can drive down the road and see something on a billboard and say, I think I want that. Or you could drive through a neighborhood and see someone's beautiful, wonderful car that they are way in over their head on and probably can't even make the payments on, but you could say, I kind of want that. That kind of looks good. That looks like a really cool car to have. We understand the desires of the eyes, and we also understand the pride of life, the desire for ourselves to be popular and powerful and to be puffed up above the place that we should be. This is what Satan does. These things that God would ultimately fulfill if we'll wait on Him and do things the way that He has designed us to do, those things that God would fulfill, Satan comes and he dangles them in front of us, a cheaper version of them, I might add. He dangles them in front of us and says, take this. This looks good. I mean, imagine this. Imagine that if you waited an hour, you could have the best steak of your life. But instead, you consume upon your lust a Slim Jim. Okay? Which, I'm not knocking Slim Jims. They're a nice little snack. I like them. My kids like them. You go into a gas station, that's about that, or a gas station burrito. Okay? You choose one of those. All right? I'm not knocking Slim Jims. But if you know you've got a steak waiting, and you're like, yeah, I'll take the Slim Jim. That's what people are doing. God has a plan for all of us. God has the fulfillment of our desires for us in the way that He wants them to go, and instead we take an inferior product because we want it now and in our way. That's what the enemy does. Finally, notice verse 17. And the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever. Loving the world ultimately takes our eyes off of the eternal and puts them on the temporary. That's really our problem, isn't it? We can't see more than just a few hours in front of our face. We live right here and right now, or we live in the past. And God wants us to be looking ahead to eternity. Remember what Hebrews 11 says about Moses? It says that rather than enjoying the passing pleasures of sin in Egypt, as the child of Pharaoh, he decided to seek the treasures that were ahead as a person of God. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. He was willing to wait for the treasure that God could give him. And might I add, it was like 120 years later, but he was willing to wait for that rather than consume it upon his lust in Egypt. Loving the world ultimately takes our eyes off of the eternal and puts it on the temporary. And that's why John says the world is passing away. All these things that we feel like we have to have now and that we want to consume upon our desires of our flesh, the desires of our eyes, the pride of life, all those things are passing away. They're temporary. But whoever does the will of God abides forever. So, this is what Satan does. So you can understand, he can use anything. He can use money, he can use houses, he can use cars, he can use clothes, he can use your place in life, he can use your talents and your abilities, he can use your friends, he can use your enemies, he can use education, he can use college, he can use the government, he can use the local news, he can use anything in this world to dangle something shiny in front of your eyes and say, take it. Take it. So the addiction to smartphones today is concerning because it lumps all of those distractions that we just talked about, the desires of the flesh, desires of the eyes, pride of life, all of those distractions from the glory of God, they get lumped into one device that society expects us to use. I want you to go to a public place and pull out a flip phone in front of people in a public place and watch people's faces today. Okay? Or pull out a flip phone in front of your grandkids. I remember several years ago, my dad had a BlackBerry. You guys remember those phones, which were great phones. They were really good. He had a BlackBerry. It still had keys on it, right? But it was right around the time where smartphones were coming out, where it was a touch screen. I remember this little girl came up to my dad, and he had his phone out, and she was looking at his phone. She said, "What are those buttons on it?" You know, she had no idea. She'd only seen phones that had a screen on it. Why does your phone have buttons on it? Okay. Society expects us to have these. If you don't have these, you're practically a Luddite. Okay? You don't like technology, and you're an old fuddy-dud. And people will shame you if you don't have this. I can't think of any other thing like material possession that the world is as obsessed with as these things right here. They want it for themselves, and they expect everyone else to have it. And in fact, they want even young people to have them. Young people, little ones. So, let's talk about those three temptations that Satan has, and let's talk about them in connection with this. My goal is not to get you to baptize your cell phones, okay? I'm not trying to get you to get rid of it. I want us to understand that this can be a very dangerous thing that takes our eyes off of God very easily. That's all I want us to do. Okay? That's all I want us to do. So, desires of the flesh, as John puts it, the desires of the flesh. Without going into too much detail, I want you to understand the huge issue that viewing things that people ought not to view on these devices, explicit images and videos, okay? I don't want to go into too much detail. We got kids in here. But it is a huge issue. There was a poll put out a while ago. This is just for Christians. This is for self-professing Christians. This isn't for everybody else. This is just for Christians. 15% of people 60 years or older admit to having a habit of this, of viewing pornography. 20% of people 50 years and older. 25% of people 40 years and older, 30% of people 30 years and older, and from people 18 to 29, they didn't even do people younger than 18, which I imagine it's worse. From people 18 to 29, over half admitted. This is just the people that admitted it. Over half that were Christians admitted to having a problem. Parents, if you think that your child won't be tempted with it, you better just close your eyes and plug your ears and say, not listening, not listening, not listening, because that's basically what you're doing if you think your child is not going to have an issue with this. Because it is right in their face. But that's not the only desire of the flesh that this promotes. And by the way, this has always been a problem for a very long time. But it's really a problem now because it's right in your pocket. You don't have to go to a store for it. You don't have to go to a movie rental place. Remember those places? Okay? You don't have to go to your crazy spot out in the woods where you dug a hole and put it in a hole so your parents couldn't find. You don't have to do any of that. It's right here. That's not the only desire of the flesh. We also have a constant need for mindless distraction. A constant need for mindless distraction. We use digital distractions to keep work away. There was a poll recently said the average American college student wastes 20% of class time, and I think this is probably a low number, 20% of class time tinkering on a digital device. Okay? I mean, if you've ever tried to get work done, thinking work, where you're on a computer or where you're reading or something like that, I mean, how easy is it to break your line of thought from that work and pick this up and just lean back in your chair? That's what I do. I lean back in my chair. That's why I keep breaking chairs. You lean back in my chair and just let my mind go comatose for a minute. It's so easy. We have a constant need for mindless distraction. We use digital distraction to keep away from work. We use digital distractions to keep away from people. Go out somewhere today. Go to the grocery store today. I want you to count how many people are walking around the grocery store with earbuds in their ears so they don't have to talk to anybody. I want you to count. Or people that you see out in public that have earbuds in their ears and they're looking at their phone and they're not paying attention to anywhere they're walking or any place they're doing. Because it is a way to keep them from looking and talking to and interacting with people. And that may be the way of the world, but guess what? Christians are called to love their neighbors, and if we don't ever see our neighbors or talk to our neighbors or interact with our neighbors because all we're doing is this, beloved, that's a problem. That's a problem. Finally, we use digital distractions to keep thoughts of eternity away. We find an escape from the deep, hard, and difficult aspects of life in this, in digital media. I told y'all when I was about 18, 19 years old, 19 or 20, somewhere around there, I had gotten my first preaching work. And I used to, I had this table in my house. I lived in a parsonage because I couldn't afford a house, obviously. I was 20 and I think I made $300 a week, It's what I made when I first, which was pretty good for a 20-year-old by himself. It's pretty good pay. But I had this kitchen table that I never ate at, because who eats the kitchen table? But I had this kitchen table. Anytime a bill came in the mail, guess what I would do? I'd take it and I'd put it on that table, and it was like if it went on that table, I didn't have to pay it. Okay? Taxes on the table. Don't have to worry about it. Taxes, what are those? Okay? A bill on the table. Don't have to worry about it. It's on the table. It's on the table. It's invisible. It doesn't exist anymore. Don't have to pay it. Don't have to worry about it. We do this with these things. I don't want to have to worry about or think about anything hard or difficult or deep. And so I'm just going to look at TikTok and let my mind go numb for a few hours. We use these for the constant need for mindless distraction. But what about the desires of the eyes? It has the desires of the eyes on lockdown too. I want to talk to you about the Diderot effect. The Diderot effect. Denis Diderot was poor almost his entire life. But despite being poor, he was well known because he wrote one of the most popular encyclopedias of his day. His daughter was going to be married, and he could not afford a luxurious outfit for the event. Somehow, Catherine the Great of Russia found out. Okay? And because she knew about him because of his encyclopedia. And so she gave him 1,000 pounds for his library, the equivalent today of probably around $50,000. Okay? A lot of money. He soon bought a new scarlet robe, but he quickly found that the scarlet robe was so much better than all the rest of his things, and so he started purchasing more and more to update his lifestyle until he eventually ran out of money. That's called the Diderot effect. Here's what the Diderot effect is defined as. Obtaining a new possession often creates a spiral of consumption which leads you to acquire more new things. And as a result, we end up buying things that our previous selves never needed to feel happy or fulfilled. Does that sound familiar? That is what our country is built on, folks. I love it. I love living in America. I'm so glad that I do. Okay? It has been a blessing to grow up in America. I love it. But it is founded on this very principle, I'm telling you. It is built upon this very principle of buying more and more and more and more. Because of the smartphone, you do not even have to leave your bed. You don't have to leave your bed. In fact, because they're water resistant now, you could do this in the shower if you wanted to. You do not even have to leave your bed to let the desire of everything that you see take hold of you. You see it in advertisements and sales on websites and even in the perfect little lives that you see people post on their social media profiles. And you can want and want and want and want everything that you see right here just on the thing that's in your pocket. I want to talk to you about the propaganda of more. Paul Mazur of the Lehman Brothers said this, and this is right after World War II. He said, "We must shift America from a needs culture to a desires culture. People must be trained to desire, to want new things, even before the old things have been entirely consumed." You know what I'm talking about? You need a new dress even though you got 15 dresses in your closet? We must shape a new mentality. Man's desires must overshadow his needs. Friends, that is the foundation of the consumer culture that we have in our world right now, in our country. Because of the smartphone, though, this demonic mentality, that's what it is, it's demonic. I'm just going to come out and say it. It is demonic. The idea that we would not be satisfied with our needs, but that we would just fulfill our desires, everything that we want, everything that we see, everything that we touch, it's demonic. Because of the smartphone, this demonic mentality is shoved in your face almost every time you look at it. Buy this, you need that. What about the pride of life? What about the pride of life? People crave acceptance, likes, laughs, attention, and popularity. The smartphone and social media has heightened this. It's made it so that people who aren't even particularly great or funny or smart can have a platform that puffs them up and even makes them money. These are called influencers. You've probably heard of them. Okay? They're not good at anything, but somehow the world idolizes them and sees them as an influential person because of this device. Go to a touristy place and look at all the people filming and photoing themselves in the best light with the best filters, with probably the best After Effects and editing, trying to get the perfect shot, all so that other people will look at them and say, that's what I want to be. And then we have FOMO, fear of missing out. Fear of missing out. Fear of missing out is a major issue with smartphones. We feel like we need to have these things because we will be missing out on everything we've already talked about. FOMO was the first fear. Satan said, eat from the one forbidden tree, Eve, and you will be like God. The serpent preyed on the fear that Adam and Eve were missing an opportunity to be like God, and all they had to do was just eat this one little bite. Sometimes the smartphone promises this. All you have to do is get this device, and all of your struggles and your needs will be fulfilled. You'll have a calculator and a camera and a video camera and a level, and you'll have this and you'll have that. You'll have all your books there. You'll have everything that you need. Everything will be fulfilled. Just buy this one simple tool. We don't want to miss out on that, do we? We could probably go on, and I know we can't. But we live in a smartphone world. We do. We do. We live in a smartphone world, and the smartphone can be a legitimately good tool for our lives. So what should we do? What should we do? I want to direct your attention to one more scripture, and then we're done. James chapter 1, 13 through 15. James chapter 1, 13 through 15. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. This is how temptation works. He dangles your desire in front of you. The best thing that we can do is know those aspects of the smartphone that distract us from God's glory and either limit our exposure to them, learn to change our desires about them, or remove them altogether. Those are our options. Either limit our exposure to this, change our desires, which is a lot harder to do, admittedly, okay? Or get rid of it, baptize it. That's it. Those are our options. And so, here's a couple things. Consider turning your smartphone into a dumb phone, okay? At least periodically or permanently. Turn your smartphone into a dumb phone. Remove all those apps that tempt you with the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life. Turn your phone to grayscale so it's not shiny and flashy and colory. Or you may even consider going to a dumb phone. Okay? Getting rid of the smartphone and going to a dumb phone. I don't know where your life is right now and what need you have of this, but what I think I accomplished what I wanted to do today was not for you to get rid of this. It was for you to understand that this tool can be very dangerous. And if you think that it is not dangerous to you, if you think that it is not distracting you, if you think that you're not using it as sort of a drug to go comatose and not have to think about things for a few hours, then you're going to wake up one day and realize you're addicted to it. Been there, done that. I want to offer you an invitation. I want to offer you an invitation today. Okay? Technology is a good thing. It's in our world. God created everything for good. It has a good purpose. But unfortunately, we, through Satan's temptation, we like to pervert the things that God has made, to twist them and shape them in our own image and use them for our own evil purposes. That's what's happened with the smartphone. It can be a great thing that blesses your life and that you're able to use. But let's be aware that it can be a problem and that it can be a problem that's affecting our families, especially young people. Young people don't need to grow up addicted to screens. That's going to create problems for them later on in their lives. I want to offer you an invitation today to bring anything before God's people. We don't need smartphones to do that. You can come up here, sit on one of these pews, and talk to us. We'll pray for you. We'll give you a hug. We'll do whatever it is that we need. Whatever you need, we would love to do that for you today. We'd love to study God's Word with you. If you need something, this invitation song is going to be for you. Won't you come as we stand and as we sing?